me give you a bit of a sense of the agenda that we're going to go through. I'm going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes doing a bit of an introduction. My name's Sean Fitzpatrick, and then after that, I'm going to turn it over and have Shellie Rathie from First Calgary Financial talk a little bit about the opportunities and challenges they've gone through on looking at employee engagement with their organization, and then we're going to spend about 5 or 10 minutes on questions and wrap up. Of course, if there are questions that come on, please feel free to ask them in the menu on the right-hand side. And for those who don't have questions, again, you can always email them afterwards or reach out to Shellie or to myself. So first of all, Sean Fitzpatrick. I'm with an organization called TalentMap. Our organization focuses on employee engagement and helping clients measure and manage engagement within their organizations. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview on engagement, and then I'm going to have Shellie Rathie. She's the Assistant VP of HR and OD at First Calgary Financial. Shellie will be talking about a case study within First Calgary, the process they've gone through, some of the opportunities and successes and challenges they've endured while they're going down their employee engagement journey. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have a few minutes at the end for Q&A and wrap up. Just a bit about TalentMap very briefly, and then I'll get into a little overview on engagement. First of all, we've been in business for, I guess, close to 14 years now, and we've run thousands of employee engagement surveys. It's really our core business. This is really what we do, and it's really our only focus. We're not in a whole bunch of other areas. So we're glad to be able to work with a whole range of different organizations out there, anything from professional service firms, public sector, healthcare, and of course, you can see at the bottom, financial services is an area we do an awful lot of work in a range of different financial service sectors. One of the areas we're starting to do more work on is in the credit union area. We've recently done some work with Alterna Savings here in Ottawa, First Calgary in Calgary, and we have 3 other credit unions we're starting to work with this spring. And because of that interest in credit unions, we decided that it might be interesting just to take a little more focused look at engagement within that particular sector, both right now in Canada, but also we're going to start to look into the U.S. and over in Europe. So that's a little bit of background around TalentMap. So let me turn now to employee engagement and touch a little bit about some of the key factors of it, and then I'll turn it over to our key speaker, Shellie, and have her talk about her experiences. So one of the important things around employee engagement is making sure that you have a good definition of engagement and that you're trying to measure it with a fairly solid psychometric pattern or psychometric set of questions. So when I talk about that, that really means that your survey, when you're measuring engagement, if you're using a survey, is designed properly. It's designed with the reliability and validity in mind. Anytime you measure engagement in any organization, whether it's in credit unions, financial services, or even in healthcare, public sector, and so on, they really should have these core fundamental concepts. And these real 4 concepts is measuring how people connect logically to their work, how they connect emotionally to their job, and the resulting behavioral output. We call it the head, heart, and hands model, and it's really around assessing employees through a series of questions, how they're connected to their job logically, emotionally, and what that resulting outcome would look like. Whenever you're measuring engagement, all of the core engagement measures out there, no matter what vendor or partner or organization you look at, all of the academic research as well as the practitioner and consulting work should have these components around measuring engagement in there. When we measure engagement within our clients, we typically use 6 questions to measure engagement, and those 6 questions allow us to capture how people are connected logically and also how they're connected emotionally. If anything you walk away with around an understanding of engagement probably the best two words that equate to employee engagement in the workplace, whether it's in credit unions, financial services, or other, is discretionary effort. Whenever you talk about engagement, really what you're trying to do is measure discretionary effort, where your employees stack up on that continuum from meeting just the minimum requirements in the workplace to really firing on all cylinders. And if you sort of looked at sort of the level of performance of an employee, whenever we measure engagement, we're really trying to measure where organizations stack up on this continuum. Of course, highly engaged organizations have a large percentage of employees that are high on performance, high on that sort of I want to do it curve, where organizations with much lower engagement have discretionary efforts scores or engagement scores much lower, and they're sort of the employees that I have to do this type of work. So looking at employee engagement and thinking about it in terms of it really equals that discretionary effort you're trying to tap into with respect to. So let me just turn briefly to key drivers of engagement. I want to just touch on those a little bit because I think they're important. When we talk about drivers of engagement, there's really the fundamental aspects of an organization. When I talk about aspects of an organization, what I'm talking about is really all of the core aspects that make up their culture. So how you interact with immediate management, the vision of the organization, trust in senior leadership, professional growth opportunities, how well you're paid and compensated, level of teamwork, things like innovation and improvement. All of these are fundamental potential drivers in any organization. And what we do whenever we do an employee engagement survey, typically we go in and we try to measure employees' perception of all of these aspects, or we call them in the survey side, variables in the workplace. We also then measure employee engagement through a set of 6 core questions. And whenever we do that, we're really looking at how does customer focus relate to employee engagement scores, teamwork relate to employee engagement scores, compensation relate to employee engagement scores, and so on. When we talk about drivers, what we're talking about are these underlying policies, programs, culture that drives your engagement. And if you understand how to drive your engagement, what you're able to do is improve upon it. And whenever we run an engagement survey, we're able to identify, for example, within any organization, what their top 2, 3, 4 drivers of engagement are. In this example, you'll see up on the top right-hand side, teamwork, innovation, and professional growth. Those are the 3 areas in this example. By comparing the scores from the employees on how they scored on the independent variables, all the drivers of engagement, to how those same employees scored engagement, we're able to identify what the most important aspects to improving engagement are for that organization. Let me just explain a little bit more deeply. Whenever we do a key driver analysis, basically what we're doing is we're looking at how individuals score engagement and how they score other aspects of the workplace. Each blue dot here would represent an employee score. So employees that score high on teamwork and high on engagement, some employees score low on teamwork and low on engagement. And if you get something that looks like a straight line, that's a very strong correlation or predictor of engagement. On the other hand, you might have data that looks like this on the right-hand side. Looks more like a shotgun blast, where some people scored high on work-life balance, some scored low on work-life balance, some scored high on engagement, some scored low on engagement, but there's no real pattern to the relationship between work engagement and work-life balance. So this type of data has very little example as to what's important to employees, so you don't really know what to work on. So finally, what we do is we're able to take the core driver pyramid and be able to identify which areas are number 1, number 2, number 3, based on a mathematical or statistical formula. So for this organization, teamwork is actually the area that has the highest impact on engagement. Improving your teamwork scores will drive your employee engagement scores up, which will drive member satisfaction, member loyalty, repeat customer share of wallet up, which will then help drive profits. So that's really the underlying fundamentals of how we run a key driver analysis to try to understand what is the underlying thing that managers can actually work on to improve employee engagement. We actually can get right down to a formula, like a 10% increase in your overall teamwork score would result in something like a 3.5% increase in your employee engagement score. So it really gives you that ability to understand where to focus as an organization. And that's the value of being able to do a properly designed survey and a proper designed key driver analysis. And then finally, we're able to identify things like and display the data from your survey on a quad map. This example of the quad map shows some data within the organization, compensation, work-life balance. It is on the far left-hand side of this grid, so that means the data looks more like a shotgun blast in that it has very little relationship to engagement. Employees still scored it high. They scored compensation high, work environment high, but as a driver of engagement, it has a very weak relationship. On the other hand, this organization scored innovation, teamwork, professional growth, medium to low, but the data looks much more like that on the right-hand side in that it has a very strong correlation to engagement. So this tells me for this organization, their biggest opportunities lie around improving information and communication, improving organizations' employees' understanding of their vision, and improving and driving changes in professional growth. Increases in these will actually relate to increases in employee engagement the most. So finally, I'm going to turn it over to Shellie. So I just wanted to give you a little bit overview of what key drivers look like and just spend the first 15 minutes or so on that. I do want to touch on financial services. We did some work, including work within credit unions. And what we found when we looked at broadly, what are we seeing across all financial services, including, and these are small to mid-size organizations, including a number of credit unions here in Canada. The number one driver of engagement across all employees was around professional growth or challenge in the job. So being able to learn and grow and develop was number one. So that had the strongest correlation to engagement, similar to what we just looked at. Number two was organizational vision. Employees wanting to understand how what they do in their day-to-day work, how their work relates to their department that they're part of or group that they're part of, and how their group overall relates to moving the organizations forward. So understanding vision, and that's an important area that the leadership team has control over. And then finally, teamwork. Teamwork was number three. And teamwork was really around the sense that as an organization, we're really not all on the same page, or we don't feel like we're all on the same page. Things like when we looked at the comments around teamwork, and we interviewed something like 12,000 employees across 40 different organizations here, things like we want to remove barriers. We operate in silos. Is some of the comments that people felt like. Let's work towards a common goal. These are frontline staff that felt that they really didn't have the ability to work across the organization to achieve, that cross-selling, better share of wallet, increasing member satisfaction. All of those issues are talked about, and they hear the senior leadership team talk about it, but they feel that they're constrained. They don't have the resources, whether it's the tools, training, support, systems, to be able to work as a team and to be able to solve and serve their customers and members better. We're actually developing or finalizing a research paper on this. Watch for, and happy to send out a copy of our research paper. It'll be coming out in about a week or so on just financial services, including credit unions, and what the key drivers of engagement and what we're learning. It's about 5 or 6 pages on research that we're happy to share with others. So I'll stop there. Again, Sean Fitzpatrick from TalentMap, just to give you a little bit of background about drivers and how typically we go about approaching understanding survey results within organizations in our work. I want to now take the opportunity to introduce Shellie Rathie. Shellie is Assistant VP of Human Resources at First Calgary Financial. I've had the chance to work and meet with Shellie over the last couple of years. We've had the chance to work with First Calgary on their employee engagement survey and help them measure some of the aspects that they're looking at. And I think what Shellie's going to do is sort of give you a bit of a sense of what she's learned along the journey around employee engagement and what's worked and what hasn't worked on her side. So I will stop there, turn it over to Shellie, and please, if you can share with us what you've learned along the way, that would be great.
Great, thank you, Sean. So we can go to the next slide, please. Let me just, for those of callers on the line, let me just tell you a little bit about who First Calgary is to start with. We have been in existence from 1938. Of course, there have been a number of mergers that have gotten us to where we are today. We are the 9th largest credit union in Canada and equally the 2nd largest credit union in the province of Alberta. Currently, we have over 500 employees. We service about 80,000 members, and we are predominantly located just within the urban center of Calgary. We have one outlying branch in the Okotoks area, but we are definitely an urban credit union. We definitely have been first to market on some different online mediums with our app and our mobile banking. Below, you'll see we've got a couple of awards that we've won recently. This year, we were fortunate enough to win one of Canada's most admired corporate cultures. We have, since 1999, been one of Canada's best managed companies. We're also a top employer of Canada, Venture 250, and the Pathways Leadership in culture. A little bit about our history with engagement. And, you know, I say engagement now, but it used to be satisfaction. So we did, prior to our relationship with TalentMap, we were doing satisfaction surveys with an external provider. And we certainly received lots of data, but it didn't capture that discretionary effort piece, the piece that would really show that the employees were emotionally invested in First Calgary. You know, we think we've got a great culture. We know we've got a great culture, but we were wanting a little bit more information. And we also recognize that the industry best practices were trending towards engagement rather than satisfaction. Of course, we explored many potential vendors for surveys, and we ended up with TalentMap. We also looked at the best employer programs. Unfortunately, with those programs, the timing of their surveys and when we would get the data back, and in one case it was like 8 months, it really didn't align to our needs. So we did make the decision to go with TalentMap. And on the next slide, you'll see a bit of our history on what we've done over the last couple of years. So Sean,
I'll just mention that, Shellie, that was a very good decision, I hope.
Yes, it's been a very good decision. So we started in September 2011 with what we call a pulse check. So that's, you know, probably about a 10 to 15 questions just to kind of get a sense from our employees what their engagement levels are, again, based on the drivers that Sean shared a few minutes ago. Then in 2012, we did more comprehensive. As Sean's got here, the Talent Gauge Classic. That was about a 42 to 44 questions. We had a very good response rate. I think we were up over 80% of our employees who responded. We got our scores, and then we embarked on a journey on, okay, what were we going to do to increase our scores? In the interim, last September, we did another pulse check to say, okay, we know what our scores were. Let's just get a little pulse, see how we're doing. And this September, we're going to run the full 42-question comprehensive survey again. And let me just tell you that in the last sort of 12 to 18 months, what we've embarked upon to fully understand the results that we're getting. So we had 3 focus sessions, and we pulled in our senior manager group. So of course you can slice the data in many different ways. You can do it by years of service. You could do it by level of responsibility. You can do it by age demographics. And we have all of that information. But what we chose to do was look at our senior management group. So the group of people that have a level of responsibility just below the executive. And we wanted to find out what was driving or not their engagement. And our results showed, just like Sean had showed, the three primary areas that were the professional growth, the org vision, and the teamwork. So we had these focus groups to look at what was it about those aspects that were working or weren't working. We wanted to sort of maybe clarify some of the comments that were made, and not comments on the survey particularly, but comments through our focus groups when we asked questions, asked for further clarification. We had to determine whether the issues were in a branch or whether it was a corporate-wide issue. We did get a final report from TalentMap, which we shared with our executive. And then from that, it drove some corporate action planning. And one of the things that we have learned, and actually it's on another slide, is the importance of educating our people between satisfaction and engagement. But why are we measuring it? Well, we know, and it's okay, Sean, next slide's good.
Okay.
We know that employee engagement is a direct indicator of the commitment that staff will deliver above and beyond the norm. And I think for all of you who are in the field of HR, you absolutely know the importance of having an engaged work staff. And it's interesting, my CEO had sent me an article that was in, I think, the Wall Street Journal, I don't know, I'm going to say within the last year, and it talked a little bit about the fact that really some of your highly engaged people are your least social people. They're the ones that are heads down at the desk, really working hard, would do a lot for the organization, and they actually get frustrated with the people that are just out there to have fun. And I think when we were assessing satisfaction, we were thinking that we had to do more of those social things, which is really the wrong way to go. And our CEO has placed employee engagement practically at the top of his priority list for the fiscal 2014 year. Okay.
Shellie, I have a question here. Is it okay if I ask it? It's just around a question you mentioned on the previous slide, I think, around managers, and you decided to look at that management group. Any particular reason why you focused in on that group versus another group? You know, because there's lots of different issues that organizations have. Some have challenges with, you know, new hires and millennials. Some have challenges with certain functional groups. Why did you hone in on that sort of level of management more than any other group?
Two reasons. One is that they are often the ones that we expect are going to drive engagement activities down to their direct reports. So we needed to really make sure that they were educated on the difference between engagement and satisfaction, as well as what were some things that they could do to increase the engagement, as well as we had to recognize that they are recipients of actions that the executive would do. So what kind of action planning did they need the executive to do to increase their own engagement? Our survey results showed that our new hires tended to have pretty high engagement levels. You know, they were in a bit of the honeymoon stage. It was a great place to work, a good corporate culture, and they knew their job and they were still learning. I think a lot of my credit union colleagues will recognize that, you know, the opportunity for professional growth and continual development becomes challenged because of the size of our organization. So we take a look at our senior management group, who many of them have been here sort of in that 6 to 11 year mark, and they're looking and saying, where can I go in my organization? What position is about, you know, upward the ladder, knowing that, oh, I've got this group of, let's say, AVPs or executives that aren't ready to retire. And when you're in the size of some of our credit unions, that's really challenging. So we chose that senior management group because, A, they have to drive activities for the people below them, but also they need and want activities driven towards them by the executive to raise their engagement, so they were sort of the sweet spot.
That was helpful. So you really looked at them as the linchpin in terms of your organization, an important group to look at.
Extremely.
Another question just came in, and I could take a shot at this, but also Shellie, maybe you have some comments on this. But question is just from, I think it's Janice. What would you say? Would you say it's true that middle managers are among the least engaged? I'll sort of give a bit of a sort of general comment, and then Shellie, maybe you could talk within the context of First Calgary.
Absolutely.
What generally we notice in some organizations that mid-level management in what we call mid-sized organizations and even larger organizations tend to have a lot more variance in engagement. And just follow me for a minute. What this means, what I'm meaning here is we'll often see middle-level managers either very engaged, more engaged than frontline staff, and then the most senior managers the most engaged, or we'll sometimes see it as the opposite. They're actually lower than frontline staff. So middle management tends to have quite a range of scores across the data that we see, which makes them for a very interesting group. Frontline staff, their range of scores are a little bit lower on average, but they tend to not go up or down too much. Senior leadership tends to be a little bit higher on average, or quite a bit higher on average. They tend to have generally higher engagement and tend to stay high. It's very unusual to see low engagement in senior leadership, where middle-level managers in some organizations can be quite low, others can be quite high. So we see quite a range, or the sort of min and the max around engagement scores to range quite a bit in middle management, which is interesting. I think it talks a little bit about their challenges within organizations where they fit, in trying to deliver what senior leadership needs, but also hamstringed sometimes by the resources available to them. So that's what we see in the broad data. Shellie, maybe you could talk a little bit about your experiences.
Sure, and Janice, for First Calgary, absolutely, our middle managers did show up as the least engaged of all of the demographics that we cut the data in. And I think that it's part and parcel of what are some of the key drivers and what we've been doing internally over the last 18 months. And a couple screens from now, I'll share a little bit of that, which will show you why that group did show up as a little bit less engaged. So let's go to the next screen,
Good.
Sean.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Sean, I'm going to get you to talk on this one.
Yeah, I'll sort of just briefly, this is something that we provided to First Calgary, but it just broadly speaks to how, two things. One is it lays out the model of linking survey components, whatever they are, to the business results. But it's also a very important concept because as HR professionals, for those who are in the HR field on the phone here, to be able to help your executives connect the dots between what you do as a HR professional, which is on the left side of this slide, components around creating an engaging workplace, like looking at customer focus, looking at immediate management, looking at how the vision is communicated, how teamwork is enabled within the organization, and putting programs, initiatives, and aspects in place to drive that. Well, the reason why you do that is because it creates a set of attitudes in the workplace. Attitudes that are displayed as people who are focused. As Shellie said, that some of them are the ones that have their head down and they're less social. Not always the case, but that's a very good example of a fully engaged employee. They're more resilient, more committed. These are the types of attitudes that we can understand based on the survey results. And we know that attitudes drive behaviors. And behaviors, things like employees willing to go the extra mile, being a lot more collaborative, a lot more willing to be an ambassador for the organization. And we know that behaviors drive business results. And that's what executives pay attention to. They look at things like retention, member satisfaction, member growth, share a wallet, risk mitigation. These are some of the things that executives pay attention to. So if we look at something like this, on the right-hand side is where the senior leadership team is focused. On the far left-hand side is where the human resource and OD sides of the business look at. And what something like this is, well, how do you connect the dots? And one of the jobs of HR professionals is helping managers understand what we do in the workplace and why we do it as HR professionals and how it drives attitudes, which drives behaviors, which then helps drive the types of business results that we want.
So here's the first Calgary score from our comprehensive survey. And the questions on the left are the 6 questions that will help us determine the discretionary effort and the level of engagement. Sean, why don't you explain this better than I can?
Sure. I'll explain a little bit about how we come up with the engagement score. So the overall score, if you see up at the top, it's 69. So 69% or almost 70% of the staff at First Calgary here scored favorably on engagement. And that compares very much with the benchmark out there of financial service firms. So First Calgary came in pretty much on average, bang on, when you look at the whole population, senior leadership, middle-level management, frontline staff. And basically, the engagement questions, the 6 engagement questions down below it, are averaged together to provide an overall engagement score. So when you're looking at that overall engagement score of 69, we don't ask people overall, are you engaged? What we asked are questions, are you proud to tell others you work here? Are you optimistic about the future? Would I recommend the organization as a great place to work? Those types of questions are asked, and they're the ones trying to measure how people are logically connected to their job and how they're emotionally connected to their job and to the organization. And these questions measure those 2 constructs. High scores on these result in that discretionary effort or behavioral effort. Very low scores on these represent people that are just coming in, putting in time, and not really trying to move the organization forward. Shellie?
Excellent. That's great. So let's go to the next screen. Okay, Sean, this is you.
Yeah, this is where previously I showed the overall sample of what a key driver output would look like. This is actually First Calgary's data set, and you can see we looked at employee engagement on the left-hand side of this chart, and these are the survey dimensions that we looked at, anything from comp to work environment to performance feedback and so on. When we did the analysis, what we found was professional growth was number 1. So that was the most important driver for employees, managers, and senior leaders, and not surprising, it usually is. Number 2 was teamwork within First Calgary. And number 3 was organizational vision, and you can see they continued on. Senior leadership was important. Compensation was in the top 5 in this particular example. Not unusual. Professional growth usually number 1. Teamwork, org vision, leadership, innovation, customer focus is usually in the top 5. Compensation, not always in the top 5. It's usually a little bit lower down.
But then, Sean,
but it's not unusual. Yeah.
No, but I would say with compensation, when we look at the city of Calgary, and so much of this city is driven by oil and gas,
yes,
compensation is a much higher driver in this city than it is in other cities.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's often regionally driven, given what the economy's like in that region.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You bet. So, folks, what this coefficient was telling us was that if we worked on those 3 aspects, we would move the needle on employee engagement. And one thing to note, the teamwork, it was not a low score. It was actually a very high score, but we also learned that if we took our foot off the gas, that score could drop. So we wanted to keep doing what we were doing and do it well on the teamwork. Now, when we talk about org vision, and I said to you earlier that our senior manager group or middle manager group was the least engaged, it had a lot to do with org vision. And that was because last year we reopened our strategic plan and we are redrafting it. And I think a lot of credit unions can understand when I say we have to decide, are we a bank or a credit union? And the values that go with being a bank versus a credit union can be significantly different, and the behaviors can be significantly different. So we are in the midst of trying to clarify that and make sure that all of our employees, but most particularly our senior managers, understand what's being asked of them. And we do know that we want to be a credit union. That is our goal. But we still have to have some sales. And sales is not a dirty word. So that's just something that we are working through internally right now. Okay, next screen. So what did our focus group, when we had them within the last 12 months, what did it tell us? Is that we needed to spend more time educating people on the difference between engagement and satisfaction. And we started with our senior manager group because they are the ones that are, as you said earlier, Sean, the linchpin. They are the ones that have people reporting to them for the majority of the employees, so they have to truly understand it. And that we wanted to understand the engagement levels of our senior managers and what would impact it, what would help them. The focus group identified 3 findings. They wanted more communication with executive, and largely that was around our org vision. They knew that the senior managers were working on that, but nothing had come out in a time frame that some of the senior managers felt was appropriate. And they also wanted us to work on truly articulating, our strategy. Are we a credit union or are we a bank? And I have to say, since our survey findings, we have brought the groups together far more often. Even when we don't have all of the final information, we will bring them together and say, okay, this is what we're going to propose to the board. Or what kind of problems can you see with this strategy before we go to the next step? So we have involved them without giving them a definitive answer. And then we needed to find more opportunities for collaboration. I think what our organization was finding is that we had so many projects on the go that involved different groups, and sometimes the groups didn't find out about a new product or a new system that was launching until the night before, but that if we could collaborate more at the early stages, then everybody would be informed in a better time frame. So that was the results of our findings. And then what do we do with those findings? So in November last year, Sean came out. We had, in the morning, we had an education session with our managers, our senior manager group, really taking them through engagement versus satisfaction. Then in the afternoon, we did some corporate action planning. Out of that corporate action planning, we had some senior managers that are leading an employee engagement committee. And this committee is now going out on tour. And they started actually this week. They're doing branch huddles, and they've developed 6 different activities to do at 6 different huddles to educate people. And we're going out there saying, we're not here to make any change. You can still, fill in your survey exactly the way you want to fill it in. But we want to help educate you so that when you are answering the questions, you clearly understand what we mean by engagement. So that's our engagement committee education sessions. We also have, our CEO is going out through the month of June on a roadshow, every branch, every location. Our CEO is sharing our second quarter results. He is sharing the plans for the strategy, not that we've formally launched it, but it's a soft launch. For some of you, you may be aware that we are in merger conversations with Chinook Credit Union, which is the 3rd largest in the province. So he is sharing information about that. He also does a blog every week, and he shares whatever is going on. We have executive for a day. So we went out to all of our employees and said, oh, would you like to come and spend a day with one of the executives? And they started with HR, and that was a couple months ago. Our VP of Finance is going to have somebody work with them for a morning coming up in early July. Adopt a location. So all of our executives, so our executives and our AVPs are aligned with different departments or branches in the organization, and we are charged with going out and spending time with people, not just coming out as a talking head, but just coming out and sitting at the MAR desk or helping in the kitchen or being part of birthday celebrations, just to get to know everybody, to increase the communication. And I think really what all this boils down to for us is connecting the dots. You know, a lot of these things we did last year, but people didn't realize that they were all part of engagement. And they were looking for, okay, what parties are we having? You know, what social events are we doing? They were thinking that that's engagement. Well, if I like being here and like going to all those things, then I'm engaged. And we are trying to turn the focus away from all that social activity. And don't kid me, we still have that, but towards the things that really impact our day-to-day job and helping people understand why we are doing things, why corporate decisions are being made, and how it's going to benefit everybody in the long term. And, you know, what's working? Well, we think this is working. We have our survey coming up in September, so we won't really know until after we get the survey results if it actually is working. But when we do a bit of a straw poll with our senior managers that we did in May, just to say, you know, if you were to fill in the survey today, has your level of engagement increased? By and large, they're saying yes. And you know, folks, it's really because we've been communicating and connecting the dots. It's not like we're adding a whole bunch of stuff, but we are just saying, we're doing this and we're doing this. And you know what, guys? You said you wanted more communication. We're giving you more communication. Well, that's sort of what we've been doing to change our scores. And Sean, I think I've got one more screen.
Yep.
So what are our next steps? And we really do want to cascade the education component to all employees. So like I said, we started the huddles this week. We have a team of 4 branch managers that are going out, and they will be visiting all branches and all departments by the end of the month to launch what we're calling our engagement huddles. There are 6 different huddles. And this is part of creating that meaningful corporate action items. We don't just want to throw something up on the wall, hope it sticks, and never do it again. We want to sort of build some traction. So making sure that our actions, like these engagement huddles, have a purpose. And we're telling them the purpose is to educate them. Helping employees connect the dots. We're getting a website up that will be part of our SharePoint, which will be fully dedicated to employee engagement and the activities. We'll put testimonials up there. We'll put like all the activities that the executive is doing so that the employees can see how all of it's connected to their engagement. And of course, we want a stronger link to our business strategy. So we keep bringing out our strategic direction document when we are talking to employees so that they can see that everything we are doing to help with engagement is aligned to the strategy. And Sean, are my screens done, or is there one more?
One more here.
One more. So what are some of our general learnings? You know, the skepticism of the confidentiality. Wow, that really is important. And we continue to tell everybody, by using an outside vendor, the vendor has no clue the name of who sent in a response. All they would have is an IP address of a computer. So if many people went to the same computer and sent in the survey, then it cannot be linked back to anybody. And you know, because we really went out and said a lot of that this year, we got some really good feedback, some very pointed, some very direct feedback. And we gave that pointed feedback directly to our CEO, and it was about 50 pages, and it certainly was not scrubbed. It was not. I did not go through it and take out the negative. I let them see it all. And we continue to tell our employees that, yeah, we heard your feedback. This is what we're doing because you gave us this feedback. Yes, Paul, our CEO, has that feedback. You know, you said you wanted this, so this is why we're doing it. And one of the other things right now that we are toying with is, right now we only do a score by one score for the whole organization. I've been in a couple of organizations where they take the survey results and the scores down to the individual business unit, and we haven't decided yet if that's the right way to go. You know, if we do it corporately, it means we're doing the same thing for the whole organization, versus if we've got pockets of certain areas of concern, we could just address those certain areas. So we're still debating that. You know, and really for other credit unions, your first step is to really create an understanding of what you mean by engagement. Make sure you know what you mean, and make sure that your employees know what you mean. And I can't stress enough the importance of having some engagement champions. outside of HR. And that's been tough because even our engagement champions kind of want HR to lead it, and we're trying to say this is bigger than HR. This is a corporate initiative, and if it's led by HR and if the action planning is by HR, then nobody feels invested in it. But if it's led by the employees, then there will be a bit more investment of their energy in it. So I think that hopefully gives you a bit of an understanding of our journey. I mean, the journey's never over, and we're always continuing to tweak and to learn and to add new things. But I hope that I've impressed upon you the importance that our CEO has put on this, and we do recognize the financial correlation between high performance, high member satisfaction, and revenue and employee engagement. Thank you.
Good. And Sean here, thank you, Shellie. That was excellent. That gave us a real good sense of the journey that you started down around looking at engagement, measuring engagement. It also showed some of the planning and actions that you've taken as a result of the initial feedback. As you mentioned, some of it is just making sure you connect the dots. I thought that was really important, and the fact that you're going out talking to staff, managers, and frontline staff about what engagement means. I think that is so critical, and a lot of organizations sometimes skip that step of really understanding what is engagement, because it is different from job satisfaction. And not only that is, you want them to be engaged in something that aligns with your business strategy. So you can be engaged, but the question really becomes, what are you engaged in? You want employees to be engaged in their business strategy. So tying sort of that journey of communicating, connecting, and understanding engagement with the journey of alignment to the vision and changes in your strategy, I thought that was really good. And it also shows the importance of the commitment of the senior leadership team to this over the long run. This is not something that is easy to do. If it was easy, every organization would be out there, and engagement wouldn't be a challenge or an issue. It certainly is not for the faint of heart. But if you attack it the way I think Shellie's team is, around systematically measuring, looking at what you need to do, making changes, going back and measuring, and understanding that, you know, some of this stuff isn't huge investments of dollars. You don't have to go in, but you do have to change, communicate, and connect to employees on some of the things that you're doing to help them understand where you're going. And a big part is communication. So, Shellie, I thought that was very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to wrap up, then I have another one or two questions that have come in. Let me just sort of wrap up with one slide, and then we'll do any questions that's coming in. Oh, yes, there is one right now. In terms of a question, have you seen much of a change in your engagement score over the last couple of years? Does it change very much? That was sort of one of the questions. I could talk generally what we see on engagement, and then Shellie, feel free if you want to talk about it at First
Sure.
Calgary.
Sure.
But generally, what we see on engagement is those organizations that make improvements on engagement, so doing the survey or doing some kind of feedback and then actually implementing action plans, the average improvement is about 4% or 4 points. And that ranges anything from about 2 points up to about 8 points. So if you've got a score of 70, on average, organizations that improve actually go up to about a 74 if they've implemented significant actions that move the needle, if they got the right level of buy-in from the executive team and really started to hit some of the things on the nose. So it's not something that fluctuates widely. You don't go from typically you don't go from like a 70 to an 80 or an 85 in a year or year and a half. Though we have seen organizations over a 10-year period we've worked with that have gone from a score of 64 to 65 all the way up to high 70s. So they have made leaps of 10 or 15 points over a period of time, and it wasn't always a perfectly straight line. Some years were up, some years were down, but the overall genesis of these organizations that committed to it over a long run were able to see two things: higher levels of engagement over a long period of time, and again, it's not a perfectly straight line, and better business results. Lower turnover in particular is one thing that they were able to identify, but also better business results over a longer period of time. So not an easy score to change, but it is changeable, and we've seen some success with organizations that are committed to it over a long period of time. I don't know, Shellie, if you have any thoughts within your organization.
Sure. And I think something to keep in mind is don't measure your success by huge leaps. I think one of the things we did one year is the year we got 69, we actually had a goal of 70 on our corporate scorecard. Well, the 69 had measured a 4-point increase, but it is hard to move the dial even 1 point. So even a 1 or a 2-point increase year over year is great success. We did see a bit of a dip last year, and so we are hoping that with a lot of the connecting the dots that we've done in the education, that we're going to see our 69 or 70 back this year, and then we will be able to see if there's been some success with what we've done.
Great. Well, thank you, Shellie. And it looks like, just for time's sake, and I know everyone's busy, we're just going to wrap up. I think I have one more slide here. And that's just a couple of things around TalentMap. You know, we are doing a number of speaking events over the next couple of weeks and months in Guelph. We run our regular online webinar. The next one is at the end of June. And then we're talking at some conferences in Vancouver and in Ontario in the fall on employee engagement. The other interesting thing is we're continuing to post a lot of research. And as I mentioned, the research we're doing on financial services and credit unions within employee engagement will be ready in the next 5 to 7 business days. For those who do want a copy of that, please send me a note. And as I mentioned, a copy of these slides as well as a recording will be available on our website in the next few days for those who might want to share with others in their within their credit union cohorts. So I want to two things. Thank Shellie for participating and sharing and being very open and transparent with some of the opportunities and successes they're having at First Calgary, as well as some of the challenges that you're coming across. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that, and hopefully the credit union group was able to that's on the phone here today was able to learn and take away some things from that. And I also want to thank all the attendees for joining us. And thanks for tuning in and hearing what we have to say on engagement. We'll wrap up there. And again, goodbye and have a great rest of the week and great weekend. Bye-bye.
Super. Thank you. Bye-bye.
To contact us or to learn more, just Google TalentMap or simply click on the link below.